Hi folks, I got a message from Ken McNutt in response to my last video. Ken I consider a very valuable critic of what I do. And he says, as usual, another consistently great video. This was a great summary of pantheism among other things, and I stayed with you right up until this point. You are not, this is my words he's quoting, you are not the organism. You are using the organism. There is only the whole. You will be assimilated. Just kidding on the last sentence, but seriously, I would say in disagreement that the consciousness I experience resides within the limits of my physical brain. If my arms and legs were cut off, I would still be here. People can get heart transplants, but there will never be such a thing as a brain transplant without it changing the individual. I grant you many points, non-dualism, monism, but even so, I'm experiencing the universe in my own limited way, using my experiences, my local environment, and in a limited sense, my genetics. Even though differences between you and I are unimportant when looking at the big picture, you can't completely ignore the differences. You are the organism. I disagree. The key sentence here is, let me pick it out again. The consciousness I experience resides within the limits of my physical brain. And the rest of the stuff was basically your own rationalizations concerning that. And your defense of that position. Okay, I'm going to talk about something that I didn't really perceive until recently, but it's very important, and I think it possibly might provide the key to really getting past the sort of position that you're talking about here, because to be honest, the position that you describe here in the sentences towards the end, there's not a lot of difference between what you're saying and basic old-fashioned mind-body Cartesian dualism, where you've got the pilot and you've got the vehicle that you're piloting, and the pilot is part of the vehicle, and ultimately separate from it, just like I'm separate from you in the sense of what we experience. The problem has to do with language, and in particular nouns. A noun being a person, place, or thing. So, consciousness, for instance, is a noun. So we instantly think that consciousness is a thing, a component of the brain. So we go looking for it as a thing. But what if it's not a thing? Now, I'm going to use an analogy with something else that's not a thing. If I put various metals and alloys and liquids together in a certain configuration, I will have an internal combustion engine. The liquids being the petrol that goes into the engine. And if I build around that other metals and plastics, I'll have a car. So think of that as an organism. The engine and the car working together and everything. It's all one organism. Different parts having different functions. Just like in the body, there's different parts having different functions. One of those is the brain. One of those is the hand, and so on. It all works together. One doesn't work without the other. Well, of course, you could have a limb amputated and you'll still be alive, but you won't be able to lift anything with this what's left. You with me so far? Everything has to work together in order to work. So, what is the function of the car and the internal combustion engine? The function is to turn fossil fuels into motion so that the car moves. All right? That's the function. Now, we don't have a nice tidy word for that function. We have to say turning fossil fuels into motion. And it would be kind of crazy to say turning fossil fuels into motion is a thing. Find me that thing. Show it to me. Where is it? It's a nonsense statement, that, isn't it? It's a nonsense question. Where is turning fossil fuels into motion? Where is that? Is it located in the engine? Is it located somewhere else in the vehicle? Where is it? I know it's in there somewhere, but it's not a thing. The problem with consciousness is that you think it's a thing. It's not a thing. Consciousness is the function of the brain. Because what we really mean by consciousness is having the experience of being aware. So the real question, which is just as much a silly question as the one about the combustion engine, the real question is, find me the experience of being aware. Where is it in the brain? Is it in the brain? It's got to be there somewhere. It's got to be a component somewhere. Find me the experience of being aware. You see the difference? That doesn't sound quite right, and yet that's what consciousness is. Consciousness is not a thing. Consciousness is a function. We don't have this sort of trouble when we think about space and time. For instance, we use the idea of time all the time. But time is not a thing. You can't say, there's time. See that fact? There's 5 seconds. There it is over there. Now, the same is true of distance. You can't say, there's 5 centimeters. Now, I could draw a line on paper, and the line could be 5 centimeters long. But 5 centimeters itself, distance itself, is not a thing. The function of a ruler is to measure distance. The function of a clock is to measure time. You don't find time and distance as things, as components. The function of the brain is to experience consciousness, to experience the feeling of being aware, which you don't find in the brain because it's not a thing. You with me? Language is the problem. Language causes us to invent things out of thin air that aren't things at all. They're functions. And this only hit me recently. I've known for quite some time that we're not going to find consciousness as a component. But I've never used language as an argument towards that end. But it strikes me as a very powerful argument. So, it's also, now let's take this, if you're with me so far, let's take this, let's really go down the rabbit hole here, take it another stage further. Another problem with nouns is, not only do they identify things that aren't real in that material sense, they also make us think that things are things when nothing in the universe is a thing in itself. A human being as an organism is really an organism environment field that extends to the entire universe. Because the blood that circulates in my veins is no different in principle from the air that enters and the carbon dioxide that exits into the environment. You take away either of those things, the blood or the air, there's no human being. It ceases to function. You need the environment of the Earth. The Earth needs the sun needs the galaxy came out of the singularity. It's all codependent. You can't have one without the other. Another good example is bees and flowers. Completely codependent. The bee collects the from the flower and accidentally pollinates the other flower. And they have this relationship together that if there were no bees, there'd be no flowers. If there were no flowers, there'd be no bees. Are they separate organisms? You can't really think of them separately. Even though one is animal and the other is plant, insect and plant even. They're not separate. Nothing is separate. What we think of as an object, as a thing, is actually a pattern that emerges contrasted with a background. But you can't really separate the two at all. You can't. So language causes problems. It makes us think that the universe really is full of separate things when it's really an immense codependent tapestry that is one thing engaged in a multitude of relationships with itself. Okay? So what I'm getting at here is, although you can say that consciousness is a function of the brain, it is also equally true to say, and more important to say, that consciousness is a function of the universe. Let that sink in for a moment. Whatever consciousness is, and it's not a thing, remember? So we're going to have to model it in some different way. Whatever it is, it owes its existence to the singularity at the beginning of the universe. Just like the entire material universe, everything in it, owes its existence. So the potential for matter and the potential for consciousness had to be there right at the beginning. I mean, the idea that the brain just came together and consciousness just bloop, emerged, that's almost magical thinking. And I mean that in a bad sense. That's a massive leap that I don't know how you really warrant that. To me, it seems far more rational to model consciousness as a dimension of the universe. We think of space as a dimension. We think of time as a dimension. We should also think of mind or consciousness as a dimension. And stop seeing that, which caused the other. Is consciousness responsible for the material universe, or is the material universe responsible for consciousness? They go together. Consciousness without a material universe isn't consciousness, because there's nothing to be conscious of. Consciousness requires subject and object. Consciousness also requires time. Because if there is no time, then all you have is like a photograph. The universe has to be like a still photograph, unmoving, unchanging. So we have both space and time, and the observation of all that through consciousness. Think of it as three separate dimensions. Can I prove that? No. But it's a model of the universe that works. It provides a working explanation for what they call the hard problem of consciousness. What is it? Where did it come from? Why is there subjective experience when it's such a weird thing? It's a working model. Now, The problem with Ken's statement, let me read it out again. The consciousness I experience resides within the limits of my physical brain. You're thinking of it as a component of the brain. It's a function of the brain. It's not a component. So it doesn't reside within you like a piece of you. It is the universe focusing itself to a point of limitation within an organism. It's also doing that through me, and it's doing that through everything else that is conscious, likely including the entire plant kingdom, and possibly all kinds of consciousness that we would barely recognize all over the universe in a multitude of ways. I think brain-based consciousness is just one form of consciousness. We won't get into all that. Let's just stick with human beings for now. But just try to bear in mind how pernicious nouns really are. And roll it around a little while in your head, because this is deep stuff. Is consciousness a thing? Or is it a function? And if it's a function, where is it? Well, it's nowhere, is it? Because it's not a thing. So when we use words like I, you, we're inventing things out of thin air that reside within organisms, but there is nothing in it. There's just a dimension, consciousness, that is focused all over the place within brain-based organisms. But it's not a thing inside them. And that is a vitally different way of looking at yourself, because when this organism dies, there isn't a thing that dies in the sense of, I don't know how else to put it. There isn't a thing that dies. You've got to move your sense of self from a pilot riding a vehicle to the entire universe focused into an organism that is not you. You are using this. You're it. You're the universe. And you're using this. Whoops. I just spilled my water. I just spilled my water. You see what I said? I just invented a false self that did something. The universe spilled that water as this organism. I'm smiling, but I am quite sincere in what I'm talking about here, because it's really hard to break the grip of mind-body dualism, thinking of oneself as a separate thing from everything. It's really hard to intellectually grasp the monistic, non-dualistic perspective. And even though, Ken, you're using words, you're saying, I grant you many points, non-dualism, monism, but you're only going halfway with it. You're not getting the whole thing. And there really is no doubt that the universe is monistic, not just in the sense that mind is not separate from matter, but all matter is not separate from matter. It is a field, waves, not particles. Everything is entangled with everything. So you just can't have you and the field, because that's two. There's only the field. And every time we kind of revert back to this, oh, but look, I still have this experience as me. I still have this experience as separation. That's just your mind playing tricks on you. Think of it more as there's a kind of barrier here where the universe gets funneled into this barrier that can't see back up the ways. It's more like that, but nothing actually resides in here as a thing. There's just a focusing of the universe. You are not real as a thing, as an entity. There's just the universe. Am I done? I know there's people watching this thinking, you are a serious screwball. Some people are thinking, oh, this guy's really intelligent. Some people are thinking, you're a real screwball. Because for some people, this way of thinking has no practical application for their life. But it really does, if you just treat it like an intellectual exercise, it really does mean nothing. But if you really, really believe this and really integrate this, it's actually quite life-changing in how you look at yourself, how you look at what life is, what it's for, and what death actually means. It changes everything for the better. So, just some things to think about. Take care, Ken, and take care, everybody else.